Welcome, everybody, to the Catholic Entrepreneurs Guild podcast. I am very blessed today to be joined by Mr. Daniel James, who sounds like he's from England, but is actually in Colombia. So it's like a little bit of a deep fake there. So, Daniel, welcome. Thank you so much.
No, nice to be here, Andrew. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, I'm super excited to hear your testimony. The purpose of the show is I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a new Catholic. I converted from the Jewish faith. We're actually from no faith, but like I was ethnically Jewish. And I'm an entrepreneur, so it's kind of like, how do I integrate my life as an entrepreneur, as a creator, with my life as a Catholic? And I think that because I was sort of thinking about that, I thought other people might also be sort of interested in that topic
hmm
and thinking about the same thing. And so I've been reaching out to people who are also doing the same thing,
hmm
like yourself, who's, you're a father, you're a Catholic, you're an entrepreneur, and sort of hear your experience, your thoughts about it, your
hmm
testimony, your journey with it. So
hmm
um,
Cool.
maybe you could give us a little bit of background. Tell us, your website is leavingleftism.com. So I think there's probably some interesting story there about your past. But anyway, could you give us a little bit of background about yourself?
Sure, yeah. So I'm also a convert to the faith. I've been a Catholic about 2.5 years now. Um, Previously, when I was younger, I was a very, very radical leftist, atheist almost my entire life from a teenager. I grew up, I was super into music and, you know, hard left music, punk music, metal bands.
What
Uh,
is hard left music?
Uh, so I was into a lot of punk music, hardcore. Um,
Would that be like Joni Mitchell?
uh, Maybe a bit more hardcore than Joni Mitchell, even. Yeah. So, um, yeah, I moved to London when I was 16 to study at a music school because I was obsessed with music. I played drums and I wanted to be a rock star, and I was idolized all my favorite rock bands. I was into bands like Rage Against the Machine, and then later, when I moved to London, I became involved in the London anarchist punk scene, which has a lot of overlap with um, the kind of hard left, like leftist activist scene. And I ended up getting into like leftism, activism. I dropped out of the music school, became an activist full time, was involved
Are you a
in
vegan?
I became a vegan. I was a vegan for 10
That's
years.
there's like a big the crossover there.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, yeah, I was a vegan for 10 years. And I got involved in a activist group that were doing a lot of illegal direct action campaigns. And I ended up going to prison for 5 years. Um, Came out of prison and was not legally allowed to be involved in any of that stuff anymore. I was prevented from being involved in it, and I was still a leftist when I came out of prison, but I tried getting jobs and I couldn't get jobs because of my criminal record. And so I went to university, I studied graphic design, I taught myself how to build websites, and then I started freelancing and working for marketing agencies, and came out here to Colombia. Um, uh, and out here in Colombia, I had a son outside of marriage, and the relation with a person I shouldn't have been involved with. She was married to another man, and obviously the relationship fell apart, and I ended up becoming a single father. So she gave me custody of my son when he was 8 months old. So I was out here in Colombia living by myself, raising a baby, and that process led me to do a lot of soul searching and a lot of thinking about my life and where it was going. And eventually, it led me to the Catholic Church, and I converted, and now I'm married, and my wife and I just had a baby. And yeah, I run
Praise
a,
God, amazing.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, it's been a wild journey, but here we are.
That's incredible. So obviously there's a ton there. Just like your story is kind of super interesting. 5 years in jail. were you one of those people that was like throwing soup on like throwing soup on like artwork and stuff for climate change? Like, is that kind of direct action like you see on
Yeah,
online where they're like people are gluing themselves to like the wall and throwing soup on stuff?
yeah. Well, we were even worse than that. We were not even throwing soup. We were just like going to people's homes at night and, like destroying their cars and, spray painting
Wow. So like
buildings.
people who
And
were involved in some kind of climate thing, like something that you guys didn't agree with climate wise or whatever the
yeah,
cause was.
yeah, it was an animal testing company that we were campaigning against. And yeah, it was a campaign of just intimidating them basically and terrorizing them. Um, yeah, so it was pretty serious.
And it's interesting. The what was the other people that were involved? I'm assuming they were kind of like all atheists at that point. Was that a kind of was that
Yeah,
sort of? I
yeah,
mean,
very,
the
very
sort
much
of
so.
yeah. I don't think there's too many believers doing that kind of stuff, right? So it's
No.
like mostly atheists and pretty. And what so how did you find your way to the Catholic Church? And was it I mean you're in Colombia and that's a Catholic country. I mean what was
Hmm.
obviously it's the grace of God, but
Yeah.
you went through so many twists and turns. Was it in prison that you started to read? Like when was this? When did this conversion happen?
Well, prison did change me for the better a lot. Most of all because it taught me the value of discipline. Because I just lived such a chaotic and wild life before going to prison. I'd never had any kind of routine or structure to my life. I was so against rules and limitations and boundaries. I was a complete anarchist that being in prison, uh, the the rules and limitations they're kind of forced on you because you've got bars there. um, the discipline is forced on you, and it didn't convert my heart at all, but it started making me think that because I achieved more in prison than I'd done ever before outside of prison. Like I got super fit. I got was training every day in the gym. I ran a full 26-mile marathon in prison. I was studying, and I just realized like I'm actually like more productive and like competent as a person when I'm doing like the same thing every day and have discipline. But yeah, what really led me to the Catholic Church was becoming a dad, um, and uh, just seeing like the harm that is caused by my my selfish actions. By I was at the time I was you know had no kind of morals really. I was chasing women, having casual sex, um, sleeping around, had a child outside of marriage, and I just saw um, when my son was born, I just saw the effect that that is going to have on him for the rest of his life, and it just really made me think like this isn't the way things are supposed to be. Like like it just when my son was born, it just became so clear to me like kids need a mom and a dad, and they need them to be in a stable, loving union, and that's just what they need. That's not what they need; it's what they deserve. And it really made me reflect, and I started thinking about the type of person I was and what kind of example I'm going to give to my son. What kind of dad am I? Am I? What kind of an example am I going to be for him? And so I started kind of reflecting, and it was around the time that Jordan Peterson was becoming very popular, and he's not as cool as he used to be back then, not anymore. But I started watching his Bible series for whatever reason, and it was the first time in my life I'd ever heard anyone speak with any kind of respect or reverence towards the biblical stories. Like someone who wasn't like a Christian, speaking respectfully about the Bible and like drawing out these deep meanings. I mean, obviously he's not 100% theologically correct, but it was what had a real impact on me was the way he spoke about the Bible, the respect he had for it, and it really made me start to take Christianity a lot more seriously. Just thought of Christianity as just this kind of weak and lame like thing for kind of boring people, and just kind of cringy. Like that was my experience of Christianity, was it was just very cringy. Like the only churches I've been to in the whole thing just seemed to me. And when I started uh, researching online about the evidence for God's existence, and I stumbled across the work of Thomas Aquinas and the Five Ways, and started watching debates between Catholics, and then started kind of tipping my toes in the water of the Catholic intellectual tradition, and I was kind of mind blown, to be honest. I never knew any of this existed. I never knew that there were actually really good logical arguments for the existence of God. I never knew that this entire intellectual tradition even existed. And yeah, I started like reading, and it took a long time. Like for probably about 4 years, I was just like reading and watching debates and learning about Catholicism. And I was, more than anything, I was kind of like intellectually converting before I had a conversion of spirit. I was kind of like on board intellectually, but I still wasn't like, I didn't go to like mass or anything. I didn't pray. Like prayer seemed very foreign to me. And then uh, I'd seen a video online talking about the rosary and how important it was. And for whatever reason, like after that 4 years or so of like studying and reading, I bought a rosary. I bought a statue of Our Lady of Guadalupe, and I said my first rosary, like listening to the Hallow app, because I didn't even actually know how to do it. So I had to like listen to someone else do it and just like follow along. And since that first rosary, my entire life just completely changed. Like everything just changed from then. And like a couple of weeks later, I met my wife, and everything, I can't really even explain it, but it just changed everything. Just praying the rosary, and yeah, not long after that, I was baptized into the Catholic Church. My son was baptized, and here we are.
That's amazing. That's so funny because my story is so similar. I wasn't doing burpees in jail, but like the Jordan Peterson piece, I watched that series, and everybody who asked me about Catholicism or anybody who I talk to about God, I always recommend that series, The
Hmm.
Psychological Significance of the Biblical Stories,
Hmm.
because for the same reason, like I wasn't really, when I listened to it, I wasn't at that point ready to listen to a priest or
Hmm.
but a psychologist,
Yeah.
that's like secular and
Hmm.
safe,
Yeah.
and to hear him talk about those stories was so powerful to
Hmm.
me too. It changed my life really profoundly, actually, that
Hmm.
lecture series.
Hmm.
um so it was amazing. And then he had Richard Bishop Barron on his podcast, so
Yeah.
that's how I got to Aquinas. So it was
Yeah.
like, so Bishop Barron came on and was like, yeah, those are all great stories, Jordan, and there's like a reality to them. There's not
Yeah.
just, you know
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
that's where Jordan was like, well, I don't know, maybe, and well, what do you mean? Do you believe in Jesus? It's like he gets all like weird about it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like I'm a fan, but I don't know where he's going with the whole like,
Yeah.
it's like simple question, Jordan. Do you believe in that Jesus resurrected? Well, what do you mean resurrection? Well, symbolically he resurrected. It's like, no, actually resurrected. Like,
Yeah.
you know, like, what
Yeah.
best accounts for the fact of what happened afterwards? Because there's a lot of people roaming around the world claiming to be God or a
Hmm.
prophet. Why this one guy
Hmm.
in Galilee, 25? Why is it 2024? It's because some guy on a donkey a
Hmm.
long time ago rode
Found.
into Jerusalem,
Yeah.
and at 30 years old, and for 3 years preached, and then like changed the entire world.
Hmm.
Was that really because people were like tripping on mushrooms? Like I've tripped on mushrooms, and You know, I've seen some interesting things when I did that back in the day, but I would never like give my life for any of those
Yeah,
images.
yeah,
You
you
know,
wouldn't die
like I
for it.
knew when I was tripping and I knew when I wasn't. You know, and
Hmm.
so anyway, like I'm just giving the one other example that people sort of give of like what else is there? Like what other possibilities are there? It seems to me the best explanation aside from the arguments for God's existence of Aquinas, which I also found
Mm.
through Bishop Barron, who's a Thomist,
Yeah,
um, the historicity of Christ,
yeah,
like the idea that that he was a real guy, and what best accounts for what happened after his time.
yeah.
Like it just
One,
seems like the resurrection's the best. Like I don't know, I wasn't there, but like what else? What
yeah.
else could have done it? I mean,
One
you
book
know,
that had a profound impact on me on the historicity of Christ. Uh, I'm not even sure if he's a Catholic, but I think his name is Lee Strobel. He wrote a
right? The
book,
case for Christ.
The Case for Christ, and I think
Yeah,
he's got another one called The Case for Easter. And I remember reading that, and he, in one of those, I think he breaks down in like very intricate detail, like what actually happened to Christ during his passion, like um, the way he suffered during his passion, um, and that was just mind blowing for me because I'd always heard the story, you know, he was crucified, he died on the cross, but when you just hear it like that, like in the way the Protestants present it, you don't really get the full picture. You know, like he didn't just die on a cross. This was like days of
yeah,
excruciating pain, and then
right.
when you read that in conjunction with what also impacted me a lot was the Gospels, the Gospel account of his trial, because I've been on trial because I've been to prison, and I know what it was like to be on trial with people throwing questions at me and my liberty on the line. I mean, I was only looking at a few years in prison, not looking at an excruciating death like he was. And I know my reaction, my human reaction was to get defensive and to try and like shift blame and to like lie. And his reaction in during his trial is just completely extraordinary. He's just so calm and he's just honest and he doesn't ask for help. He doesn't ask, you know, to be treated any different. He doesn't try and escape. He doesn't blame other people. Uh, the way the way he acts in his trial just uh, yeah, that really had a profound impact on me as well.
Did you start to pray in prison, even though it wasn't a Catholic thing? But were you ever just like so desperate that you're sitting here in a jail cell that you're just starting to ask? You know, you got to a. I would imagine like there'd be some dark nights where you're just 3 years in and some. Where were you in prison?
It's actually shut down now. It's a prison on the Isle of Wight, which is like a little island on the south coast of England. Yeah.
Right. I would imagine like there would have been some really dark times. Did that bring you to prayer, even though it wasn't obviously you weren't Catholic, you didn't have that, but or did you still, you were just like, no, I'm just gonna get strong and I'm gonna overcome, and
I
more
didn't
of like a
pray.
Pelagian.
I didn't pray, no. I mean, to be honest, like prison wasn't a super harrowing experience for me because I was lucky that I worked in the gym, so I was able to spend almost all day in the gym. And also, um, I think what really helped was I was part of a group called the Listeners, which is like a it's like a volunteer project run by a charity in the UK called the Samaritans. They're like a Christian charity, and they run this program in prisons called the Listeners, where they train prisoners in like emotional listening skills, like emotional support skills. And what happens is they've got an agreement with the prison service where if any prisoner is like feeling suicidal or feeling like depressed or like they're going to self-harm, they have the right to call a listener. There'll be like a group of like six listeners in each prison, and I was one of those. And at any time of day or night, if a prisoner calls for a listener, they have the right, the prison officers have to go and take that listener to their cell and they leave you in the cell with them, and you're just in there with them, and you just talk to them, and you just, like, try and empathize with them and try and help them out. And I think doing that, it really helped to keep my situation in perspective, because there's a lot of guys with um, a lot worse situations than mine. Guys with very, very little or non-existent support networks, guys with histories of child abuse, guys who multiple suicide attempts. And so helping others, I mean, it's not really praying, but I guess it is in a way, it's kind of doing the Lord's work in a certain way, that I was able to kind of like support other prisoners who were going through really tough times, and that actually helped me to keep things on a level and to not get depressed. So
What was a quick question? Like, what was compelling to you about leftism? Do you remember? Was it just like a rebellious thing, or what was like? You obviously gave a lot to it.
hmm
I mean, you risked your freedom and actually lost your freedom in the crusade, whatever crusade it was. Like, what was compelling to you about it?
I think it it boils down to a lot of things. At the root, I would say it's the fact that I grew up in a fatherless home, so I didn't have any like strong male role models growing up, and I was very kind of rebellious and anti-authoritarian. And I think that the lack of having a father in my home, like it made me very insecure in who I was, and I didn't really know how to be masculine, how to be a man, like how to moderate, and how to have like exercise temperance of my like aggression. And so I think there was a lot of angst and anger built up around that, and also just a lot of insecurity and a lot of pride and arrogance. I just thought I was a lot smarter than everyone else. I thought I had everything worked out. I was like 18, and I thought I knew how the world should work. I knew how things should function. So there's a lot of pride there. But I think one of the main kind of philosophical tenets of leftism that really appealed to me when I was reading like a lot of left-wing and anarchist literature is this idea um, that leftism rejects this concept of original sin. Like the concept of original sin is that we're we're born broken, whereas leftism says no, you're born perfect. How you are is absolutely perfect, and everything that goes wrong in your life is because something outside,
Structural, yeah.
yeah, it's something outside of you is wrong. It's like it's the oppressive government, or it's racism, or it's capitalism. So it's very appealing, this idea that I'm born absolutely perfect the way I am, and everything else is wrong. That's very appealing to a prideful mind.
Broken person.
Yeah, a broken person. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like that Jean-Jacques Rousseau, the sort of father of leftism. That's his line: "Man is born free, yet everywhere he's in chains." That kind of thing, right?
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Yeah.
so why is that? Oh, I got to overthrow. That's also interesting. The idea that it's like it's sort of like a rejection of hierarchy, of the
Yeah.
ordered hierarchy of like the father at the
hmm
top, right? There is a hierarchy there. It's like the father is
hmm
you know is it's not just flat left, like there's this radical egalitarianism
Yes.
rejects hierarchies.
All hierarchy. Yeah, and that's also very tied into veganism as well, because veganism, a lot of people think of it as just a diet. It can just be a diet. You can be a healthy vegan with a lot of difficulty, I would say, but you can
A
technically
lot of supplements.
yeah. But apart
Take your
from the
B12, everybody.
yeah, apart from the dietary element of it, like the morality of veganism is essentially what it's saying is it's a rejection of the hierarchy of creation, of the way that God made the world, where humans are in a higher hierarchical position in the order of creation as opposed to animals. Veganism says no, we're the same. Like, and that the life of an animal is worth the same as the life of a human. That's like the radical egalitarianism of veganism. And so that's what led me into like the animal rights and that kind of thing.
Right, right. Um, to switch forward a little bit to like the entrepreneurial your journey after you became a Catholic. I think all that we could talk for a really long time. That's super interesting to me. Everybody's faith journey in general.
Mhm.
But I want to focus a little bit on, let's say, so you've converted to the Catholic faith and you've decided to pursue the path of entrepreneurship. How do you see that in, you were totally against capitalism at one point. Now you're a capitalist, you're a Catholic. Talk me through like that change and the idea of like Catholic, how how does your faith inform your work, vice versa?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, originally it was I started working for myself mainly because I had to, because it wasn't so easy to get a job with my criminal record. Like
Right, right.
the first job I got out of prison, I was working in a contact lens factory on a production line, and a few months in, they fired me because they found out I'd been to prison. And so that's when I thought, okay, this isn't going to be so easy. So that's when I went to university, and uh, after university, well, during university, I started freelancing for myself. But after university, like when I would apply for jobs at agencies, a lot of the time I would have to declare my criminal convictions, and then I would get um, get rejected. So it was kind of a necessity in the beginning, and then I think um, once I became active in the world of work, because before I went to prison, I had a few jobs, but I hadn't really worked a lot because I was a full-time activist. Um, when I become involved in the world of work, and I saw like how good it made me feel to actually do a good job and to earn money. I think it slowly kind of changed my mind about capitalism, and I started to kind of understand that this can actually be like a positive thing. And then yeah, when my son was born, obviously my main goal was providing for him and being able to earn enough money to to care for him. So that's how it started. And yeah, now that I'm married, I'm a married man and I have a wife and children. I feel like entrepreneurship is um, I feel like it's such a positive thing in our family, in our household, because it allows me to spend a lot of time at home. So I'm lucky that I work online. All my clients are remote clients, and it gives me the freedom to spend a lot of time with my wife and my children, which really is the most important thing. I mean, it's important as a man, as the head of a household. Our job is to provide for our children, uh, financially and materially. But the most important thing that we're called to do is to provide spiritually, is to be the spiritual head of the home. And so entrepreneurship, I feel like in today's world is such a positive thing for Catholic men to do, because being able to be at home has so much positive effects on the family. Just being around your wife and your children is such a good thing. You can be a positive influence on the family, and just being there, just the fact that you're there is so good. And yeah, it's yeah, I feel super blessed to be able to work for myself.
So tell us about your business. What is are you freelancing or do you have employees or what is your and what does the business do? Sounds like it's graphic design, but maybe there's more.
Uh, I don't. I don't have employees, one person business. I've never wanted to build an agency because I've always wanted to just work by myself. So I've got a small SaaS app, which is like a CRM platform that basically runs itself. So it's like a software as a service. I have subscribers. I also contract for a few global corporations on like web development. So I design and build websites mainly. I don't really do any graphic design anymore. For several years now, I've just been involved in web development. So I design websites, I write copy, I help with marketing strategies, I optimize SEO and page speed, and I do a lot of things. But yeah, it's all mostly.
What's the CRM? What's the website? So people can go to it if anybody's listening and interested in a CRM program.
Yeah, it's called Find Points. Yeah,
So
findpoints.io.
finepoints.com.
.io. Mm-hmm.
Fine points.
.io.
Okay. .io. Awesome. And is it for a particular vertical market, or is it?
The clients that are using it are mostly telemarketing agencies. Yeah.
Telemarketing agencies. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a phone component to it? There's a telephony component?
Yeah, so it allows them to create multiple databases, and then they can it allows them to create multiple databases for their leads. Yeah.
So how has your Catholicism affected the way that you do business, if at all?
Well, the way I would say I just fired a client actually because they didn't really align with my values. But
They're in a shady market.
yeah, not really shady, just not something that really aligns with my values, you know. But I mean, the way Catholicism affects my business, I guess, yeah, it's doing business honestly with integrity and doing a good job, and you know, delivering on what you say that you're going to deliver on is the main things.
Yeah. Do you? It's interesting. I'm curious about this idea of, because you've had this change from leftism, which is very skeptical of capitalism and free markets, and there's also a certain skepticism in the Catholic faith too, because there's also you can sort of make an idol of free market capitalism as well on the other side. So
Mhm,
there's like a danger on both sides, and
mhm.
the Catholic Church sort of straddles the middle in a certain way,
Yeah.
where it's like, yes, markets are good. I think there's like this Aquinas thing of like, well, if you have the obligation to provide for your family, then you must also have the ability to do so. So you must also, therefore trade and putting yourself out there in the marketplace is the way that you can fulfill the obligation that you have as a father to your family. But
Mhm,
obviously, pornography's free market, and there's people exchanging, right? Like libertarians, those aren't leftists, those are libertarians. They're
mhm,
just saying, hey, look, the woman owns her body. She can sell it if she wants, and there's a willing seller on one side, and you have a willing buyer on the other. Like, what's the big deal, right? So there's not like it's not a like a radical acceptance of markets at all costs. We have to be prudent in a certain way in the
mhm,
middle to sort of
mhm,
say, okay, there's certain boundaries to what I can do as a
mhm,
business owner and a Catholic. I found it um I find it interesting, this question of do you um how much you feel like in the future you want to incorporate your Catholicism, if at all, into your business, meaning working with Catholic businesses, or working sort of, or do you sort of say like, look, I'm a Catholic, but it's not something that I'm going to promote, or I'm just sort of going to use it. It's going to inform the way that I do business, but I'm not going to sort of be public about that.
mhm.
Or What do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah. Um, so my existing corporate clients, it's not like I don't hide my Catholicism, but it's not really something that I get asked about, in that kind of environment, like people don't
It's not a
really,
thing.
nah, people don't really ask you about your religious beliefs. If I was asked, I would answer honestly. Um, but it 100% is my plan in the future to work more with Catholic businesses, and I'm really passionate. I want to work with more Catholic fathers and help guys who maybe are stuck in a 9 to 5 that they hate, and that they're not earning a huge amount of money, and they're spending a lot of time out of the house, away from their wife and children. I feel like I would really love to be able to help Catholic men to build some little online businesses that help them. For me, it's not really about earning money, it's about earning time with your wife and children. That's to me,
Mm.
that's the value in running a business, is being able to earn more time. If you can, um, a guy who earns 200 grand a year, but works like 70 70 hours a week is at far greater risk of being a bad dad than a guy who earns like 80 grand a year, but he only works because, and then at a certain
He does so
point,
from home.
yeah, I mean, obviously you need to provide a certain level of material comfort to your family, but at a certain level, it's just diminishing returns. Like you don't need like millions and millions. Uh, what's a lot more valuable is having the time. So I'm passionate about helping Catholic dads and Catholic men to build online businesses where they can um, spend more time with their wives and their families. And I'm super passionate about that. And um, yeah, I hope to be able to do a lot more of that in the future.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's kind of part of like the inspiration that the Holy Spirit gave me for this Catholic Entrepreneurs Guild, starting out as a podcast, but then ultimately, if we ever gain any traction, that's kind of the idea. Because I
Hmm.
have a similar sort of vision about. I also think not only that, if you're a serious Catholic in the world today, it's quite dangerous to be working for larger organizations in
Yeah,
general, just because there's this kind of like juggernaut of all these ideologies
yeah,
that go against the faith,
yeah,
essentially. I mean, the entire sexual revolution, which is the culture, at
yeah.
least in the United States and probably in
Hmm.
Western Europe as well, in England. You have to sign on to all kinds of, this trans ideology. You have
Hmm.
to sign on to this, various other kind of liberation movements, let's say.
Yeah,
Liberation from the natural law, liberations from the teachings of the church. I mean, in a certain way, there's a very interesting sort of line of thought. There's a professor in at Notre Dame, Patrick Deneen, and he's like in this. He's got this Substack called the Post Liberal Order, just talking about how um, the entire modern philosophical political movement, including the leftism that you were in chart and you were involved in, sort of is a rejection on the church,
hmm,
because Europe, which is this all came from the European mind, is was was Christendom
yeah,
before.
hmm,
Like so this is all a kind of like, no, let's turn away from that and let's go towards some kind of new thing, some
hmm,
modern secularist, liberationist, individualist
yeah,
ideas, so there's this like kind of dual movement of radical egalitarianism, which you were involved with and then also personal liberation. But liberation from what?
hmm,
Liberation from church,
yeah.
liberation from family, right? That's what it
Liberation
is. So
from the
it's
truth, really.
ultimately a
Yeah,
critique of the church. So the modern world is like one big critique of the Catholic Church, essentially.
exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
so in order to work at a big company, especially today, it's hard. So that's why when I say to people about entrepreneurship, I don't know what your thoughts are on this. I'm like, look, it's really hard. It's a hard journey. it's easier in a certain way to get a job because you don't have to be the accountant, you don't have to be the IT guy, you don't have to be the sales guy. You can just do your little role in the company, and you're sort of plugging into a system that's already proven and already works. And when you don't do that, it's difficult. It's like a hard road, but it does, for a certain kind of mentality, if you have the right mindset, it really offers a lot of benefits because you can become essentially uncancelable
Yes.
in a certain way, right? Like
Yeah.
you're not going to get fired from your job.
Yeah.
You're
Exactly.
just,
Yeah.
like, because you created the job and you've got a bunch of clients, and if a certain percent of them are pissed off, you can choose other ones because you have that skill of how
Hmm.
to do that.
Yeah.
And so I don't know that. What are do you have any thoughts on that? That's, I
Yeah.
think, another reason why it'd be like valuable for people to do that.
100%. I think it used to be the case that being an entrepreneur was seen like as a risky move. I actually think that now it's like if you're not an entrepreneur, that's the risky move. Um,
Interesting. Why do you say that?
because I think you like you were saying, in today's culture, having a 9 to 5, even if you've got a solid job contract, you're not safe. You're not your security is bound up on the whims of uh, a corporation, and we've seen we've seen time and time again that these corporations are swayed by the culture very, very easily. You can easily, you can lose your job if you tweet something that goes against, these principles of, inclusion and diversity and all the rest of it. You know, you can lose your job at the drop of a hat. And so I think being an entrepreneur is, I think it's the safest bet, because who else are you going to rely on but yourself and God, Um,
Amen. Yeah,
yeah.
that's super. I think it's very interesting. Um, you do, because if you like in your if in Fine Points, your CRM, if you have a bunch of clients, then you have this sort of portfolio of people. Like you don't have a single point of failure there. Where if you
Hmm.
have a job, you have a single point of failure. If your boss fires you,
Yeah,
you're out of a job. Like
exactly.
now you went from making an income to making no income. Whereas if
Hmm.
you have 300 clients paying you, I don't know, whatever, $50 a month,
Hmm.
like if one of them decides, like, looks at you and says, "Oh, I heard this interview with Daniel, who's the owner of this CRM, and wow, man, like he's like a weirdo Catholic weirdo guy. So like I'm gonna cancel my subscription." There, Daniel. Like, what do you
Hmm.
think? It's like, well,
Well, that,
like whatever, man. Like it's not that big a deal.
yeah, I think one of the main things that is important for me in entrepreneurship is not having a single source of income, is having as many different streams of income as possible, and having as many that are passive income as well. So like selling digital products, I think is a really good level of security against that kind of thing. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
You also have this your website is defeating leftism. You're sort of doing an is that an evangelization effort, or is it a you're not necessarily telling people to go to the Catholic Church, but you're telling people, like, go away from leftism, like this is not what you want.
Well, it's more just a way for
Or it's just
me.
more about your story.
It's more a way for me. It is kind of an evangelization effort. It's more. It's really so I've got my email list, and it's really a place for me to share my story and share my experiences and what led me away from leftism and into the Catholic faith, but also share my experiences as being a digital entrepreneur, and the ways that I have found successful to um, you know build a business and to earn income online, and how to work remotely and that kind of thing. So it's kind of like a mix between um, my 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 personal story and my conversion and my experience as an entrepreneur.
Yeah. That's really interesting. What would you say to somebody who's still caught in that leftism, that world of leftism, that sort of radical kind of would you have any words of counsel for them?
Ah. it's hard to say, but I've been asked this before, and it's always really hard to say what I would say to them, because you can say there's so many things that you could say. You know, you could like throw them all the arguments of Aquinas, and you could show them all the evidence for the resurrection, but um, none of it really has an effect unless someone is ready to listen. You know, that's the
Mm.
main thing. So I think my my favorite approach, if I was talking to a leftist, is I would just listen to them. I would just ask them questions. You know, I wouldn't actually just say like, "Look, you need to think this. Look, you haven't thought about that. Look at this." I would just listen. And I
Yeah, see
think
what
I,
they think.
I think the most important thing for us as Catholics when we interact with leftists isn't to try and convert them. Like, it's not me that converts people; it's God. God converts people. I think my role as a Catholic when I speak to leftists is to just make sure that I don't come across as a weirdo or an asshole, you know, to just make sure that, you know, like they seem that I'm just like a reasonable, intelligent, interesting, and nice person. And if we can give that impression of Catholics, I think they're a lot more willing to listen, because that's the main hurdle that they have, is that they're not willing to listen.
Hey man, that's really interesting. And what is another question I have is, what is, you live in another country, so you live in Colombia. Um, what is the how is the faith there? I mean, because it's a Catholic country, at least in name.
Yeah.
What is your experience of like how healthy is the faith there compared to in England? Or I mean, England's not a Catholic country, but what is it like
Well,
in Colombia?
it's a lot more healthy than the Catholic faith in England, but that's not hard because England is extremely Protestant and anti-Catholic. So
Well, you guys had Chesterton though, but yeah.
yeah, we did. Yeah, it, it's it. I'll be honest. The Catholic culture here is. It's the first time I've ever lived in like a outwardly religious culture where people aren't like embarrassed to be religious. Like in the UK, it's very secular. You know, if you say you're a Christian, you're like, why are you talking about God? That's weird.
Yeah, it's
Hearing,
weird. You're weird. You're weird.
yeah, here in Colombia, people talk about God every single day. You ask someone how they're doing, they say, I'm doing great, thanks to God. It's just part of the culture here. You know, like I could go outside right now, I could get in a taxi, and I can guarantee the taxi driver will have a rosary or scapular hanging from his rear view mirror. The buses that go by have big pictures of the Virgin Mary emblazoned on the side. So
Yeah, that's
in that
great.
in that sense, it's like very vibrant Catholic culture. I go to mass every Sunday, and I know people always saying that uh, the Catholic Church is like losing numbers and everything, but every time I go to mass, it's absolutely packed to the rafters. It's absolutely packed. Holy Week here in Colombia is just crazy. It's like everyone is out on the streets. But having said that, there's a lot of just cultural Catholicism where, you know, people they're brought up Catholic, but they don't really practice the faith. It's kind of like a cultural thing that they do, but it's not really taken like super seriously. So it's I think it's in a good place, but obviously there's always a lot of room for improvement, because there's a lot of problems in Colombia as well, like economic problems, and there's a lot of there's a lot of problems with like sexual degeneracy and everything. I mean, just the general problems that we have in all modern culture. So,
Is it more so in Colombia than in England, like sexual degeneracy?
um, I think it's slightly different. Um, there's it's a lot of it I think is driven by the economic problems, because there's a lot of prostitution and pornography
Mm.
in Colombia. So yeah, I think there's a lot more of that. There is the like the LGBT stuff as well. It's not as prominent as it is in somewhere like the UK.
Got it. Well, Daniel, I know we're sort of coming up on our time together, man. I really appreciate you sharing. I mean, your journey is incredible. Like you've had this God has really worked in your life in such an incredible way for you to be starting off as a, you know, one of these like crazy leftist people that you see on TikTok or YouTube, you know,
Yeah.
listening to Rage Against the Machine and going out and doing like really not even just like talking a bunch of nonsense, but actually going out and doing a bunch of nonsense.
Yeah.
Having your jail time, uh, burpees in jail, and then going out and really reforming your life through the Lord and coming into His church and coming home and flowering as a human being. It's just wonderful to hear your story, and I think hopefully it'll be inspirational as it already has been to a lot of people. But anybody who comes across this video now or in the future will hopefully be also inspired by your story. So I really appreciate you sharing it with us and spending
Thank
some
you.
time. This is really wonderful. Thank you.
No, I really appreciate you inviting
Maybe
me.
you want to end us in a prayer
Sure.
by any chance?
Sure.
Maybe one of the ones that us new Catholics learn. So go ahead.
You want to do you pray in Latin or?
Whatever your call, man. It's your show.
Okay. Okay. In nome di Patri, et Filii, et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Ave Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum, benedicta tu in mulieribus, et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesus. Sancta Dei, ora pro nobis nunc et in hora mortis nostre. Amen. In nome Patri, et Filii, et Spiritus Sancti. Amen.
Wow, extra credit Latin, man. Extra credit. The devil hates Latin.
Yeah. My
That's
kids love
awesome.
praying in
Well,
Latin.
hey, yeah, it's great. Yeah, Ave Maria, Ave, and it's awesome. Um, well, again, Daniel, thank you so much for your time. And where can people find you? Where would you like to point people if they want to learn more about you or get some more deeper
On,
inspiration and some interaction with you?
yeah, you can find me on X, or X at Leaving Leftism. Yeah, that's where you'll find me.
At Leaving Leftism, and then your website, leavingleftism.com.
Yeah,
And you
leavingleftism.com.
point there to all your other projects.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Great. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Daniel. It was really
No,
wonderful.
thank you, Andrew. God bless.
All right, signing off.